Hello, friends, and welcome again to another one of our RCIA classes. We are continuing the section on Christian morality, and today we will be starting a new section under that, which is given the title of The Catholic Teaching on Social Justice. And we begin our class again with a prayer in the name of the Father, and the Son, and the Holy Spirit. Amen. Our Father, who art in heaven, hallowed be thy name. Thy kingdom come, thy will be done on earth as it is in heaven. Give us this day our daily bread, and forgive us our trespasses, as we forgive those who trespass against us. And lead us not into temptation, but deliver us from evil. Amen. In the name of the Father, and of the Son, and of the Holy Spirit. Amen. To begin this new section of morality, which deals with social justice, I would like to go to one of the great quotes of the New Testament, and this is the letter of St. James, which is towards the end of your New Testament. For those of you who have the Bible we use in class, the New American Bible, the St. Joseph edition, we are going to be looking at James chapter 2, verses 14 to 17. And this is on page 359 of your New Testament. 359. James writes this: "What good is it, my brothers, if someone says he has faith but does not have works? Can that faith save him? If a brother or sister has nothing to wear and has no food for the day, and one of you says to them, 'Go in peace, keep warm, and eat well,' but you do not give them the necessities of the body, what good is it? So also faith of itself, if it does not have works, is dead." For our section on social teaching, we will be using the class textbook, This is Our Faith, and this is chapter 18, pages 259 to 274, for those of you who have the textbook. To begin with, what are we dealing with social justice? I've written over on the corner here in blue a number of key words: terrorism, poverty, unemployment, hunger, homelessness, pollution, erosion of the earth. I could add many others: ecology, distribution of wealth. There will be many other topics that come into this, but these are some key points. What does the Catholic Church have to say to this, and how does the Church teach about it? In all of this, what the Church is doing is to seek the common good. What is the common good for humankind? How do we help other people? How do we live out this reference I just read from the letter of St. James? Your textbook begins this chapter with a quote from the Gospel of St. Matthew, Matthew chapter 20, verses 26 to 28. Jesus says, "Anyone who wants to become great among you must be your servant, and anyone who wants to be first among you must be your slave. Just as the Son of Man came not to be served, but to serve, and to give his life as a ransom for many." And then Michael Pollack, the author of our textbook, goes on, as he does. He is filled with many good stories, or if you will, modern parables. And he talks about the story of a priest and a soap maker. They were friends. And one day while they were taking a walk, the soap maker asked the priest, "What possible good can religion be? After thousands of years of preaching goodness, truth, and peace, look at all the misery and sin in the world. If religion is supposed to be so beneficial for people, why has this happened?" That's a good question. The priest didn't say anything for a while, but then they came to a schoolyard where some children were playing in the dirt. And as children are when they play in the dirt, they're covered with dirt and grime. And then the priest turned to the soap maker and he said, "Look at these children. You say that soap makes people clean, but all those children right now playing in the dirt are filthy. So I wonder, how effective is that soap you sell after all?" And the soap maker, of course, protested. He said, wait, Father. Soap is of no value unless people use it. Soap is of no value unless people use it. And the priest turned around with those same words and said, precisely. Religion has no value unless people use it. One of the great quotes of Mahatma Gandhi about Christianity was, "It sounds pretty good. I wish people would live it." And that was a challenge he made to people in his own country. Christianity, religion, is good, but who will live it? Faith and religion, as St. James wrote, are empty unless we put them into practice. And so living a Christian moral life makes our faith credible, because by doing this, we are trying to now put flesh to our faith in the way that we interact with the world. My faith reflects my relationship with God on a vertical level, God to me. But then that relationship is lived out and expressed in how I interact with others, and on a wider sense, how I interact with society and the world. And this will lead us to this idea of human rights, which come from divine rights, social justice. What is right and wrong? So the first part of this discussion on social justice begins with looking at the relationship between the individual, me, and society over there on the right. What is that relationship? Do I live by myself? There's the famous line, "No man is an island." We live on an island here in Hong Kong, but we live with other people. By our very nature, human beings are social beings. We are meant to live and interact with others. And we develop our full potential as persons by the way we dialogue and we serve others. It is through dialogue and service that we grow. In fact, loving human relationships should mirror the Trinitarian life, a community of persons bound in love, Father, Son, and Spirit, this dynamic in a triangle going around, how the Father is reflected in the Son, and the Son is reflected in the power of the Spirit that moves us back to the Father. It is a dynamic relationship, always moving. And so too, our vocation as children of created in God's image, our vocation is simply this: to manifest God and then to be transformed into God's image, to become more godlike, and finally to attain happiness with God, with union with God for eternity. Now, society, this little group over here, who are they? What are they? Society consists of a group of persons bound together by a principle of unity that transcends the individual. That's a very, very deep definition. Society consists of a group of persons bound together by a principle of unity that transcends the individual. So, human societies are bound together into communities that are formed and built up upon by a constitution or a writ or a set of laws that binds the people together. And then it goes beyond the individuals to become the group, the society. Whether the institution is directly related to us, like a family or the state, or a voluntary organization to which we belong, such as a political party or a neighborhood organization. We as human beings are born into a society, a family, mother, father, children. Each family, most families I know do not have a constitution, but they do have rules that they follow as a family. And you learn these as you're growing up. Do this, don't do that, help here, do this, go do that, chore, clean the table, do the laundry, help with preparing a meal, etc. The family begins to develop in itself a rules of order. When do we wake? When do we sleep? How do we sit? How do we act? How do we interact? One of the great reasons of having more than one child in a family is the child learns from the interaction with other siblings how to interact when they go out into the world. So, and that's the first society, is the family. The next society would be the community, or the nation state. That is a society. A voluntary organization which you join because you like the principles of the organization. In all of this, the human person must always be the principle, the subject, and the end of all human institutions. If a human institution is to be of value and to uplift us and to be a just human institution, it has to be one where the human person is the principle, not the object, but the subject, and the end of all institutions. The purpose of the institution is to help the individual. But then you go into what is next called in the textbook the principle of subsidiarity. Because social institutions exist for the benefit of individuals, because of this, they should be governed by a principle of subsidiarity. And this holds that the larger body should not take over the functions of the smaller group, if the smaller body can effectively achieve for itself the common good. There are certain things that the family can do, or even neighborhoods can do, and they should not be overrun by a federal or state government that intervenes to take over their lives. If we can achieve a common good with each other on a smaller level, we don't have to always run to the higher level. That's one of the goals or the purposes of this whole Catholic teaching of social justice. Where do we ourselves get involved, and then when do we seek outside help? The community of a higher order that would be a government, should support the smaller community, that is, local neighborhoods, families, in its need and help, and coordinate its activities for the rest of society, always taking into consideration the common good. One of the great political divides in my own country, we have a two-party system. Some countries have three-party systems, five-party systems. One of the difficulties in a two-party system that we have constantly seen is that one group is always trying to become the mommy state. They want the state to take over our lives. They literally rip out any form of individualism out of the human spirit. The other group is very much dependent on the human resources of the people in the group, and they want the state to keep out, leave us alone. How does the state interfere? Well, I just last week paid my taxes. That's how the state interferes in my life every year. I have to pay taxes. If I don't pay taxes, I get in trouble. Do I like taxation? No. Do I want to get rid of it? I'm not sure. I don't get much out of it because I live overseas, but I still have to pay taxes, and I still have to pay into my benefits for my Social Security. Social Security is given to me by the state as a way of protecting me in my old age. And so I paid into the Social Security system since I was 16 years old. And then, since I turned into retirement age, now the state gives back from the money I actually paid in. Something the state forgets. That Social Security is not the state's, it's mine. I paid that money. And it's not that I'm getting something for free. I paid into it for every hour that I worked. Every time I had a paycheck, that paid in to my Social Security. And my Social Security is rather limited because for too many years I was a priest without a salary. But for the years I worked in my younger life, I am now reaping the benefits of those 40-hour work weeks. This principle of subsidiarity has several important ramifications, is the word they use here. First, just as God shares authority with the creatures of the world, we are given authority by God over the earth. That comes out in the whole creation narrative of chapter 1 of Genesis. So too, leaders should share their power with those they serve. Because God does this, we should do it. Because God shares with us, we should share power with those around us. The second principle is that it outlaws collectivism. Collectivism is a form of government that subordinates the individual to the state. What's yours is now ours. And this is one of the reasons Catholic social justice is against collectivism in any form, except in religious life. We are prime examples of collectivism. The day we enter into religious life to become religious priests, not diocesan priests, but priests in community or brothers, or religious women, sisters, or nuns, we leave at the door what was ours individually, and it becomes now the property of everyone. But going back to this idea of subsidiarity, the Church's teaching is very clear that collectivism in any form should not take over what individuals own. The third limit, if you will, the third part of this subordination, subsidiarity, is that it limits the state's intervention and aims at harmonizing relations between individuals and societies and works toward an international order. Now, I am talking about this in the most general sense. I am not talking about political power in one country or another. This is a very general sense of how society is defined. First of all, the leadership should be willing to share, because its own leadership comes from a shared giving, a shared gift from God to them. Second, the principle outlaws collectivism in any form. And governments should always, especially forms of government that subordinate the individual to the state. The state should not oppress the individual. And finally, this subsidiarity limits the state intervention and aims at harmonizing relationships between individuals and societies, and works towards a common international good. Societies, on their side, should promote the exercise of virtue among their members. Now, I talked a few classes ago about virtues, plural. There are many virtues. We are called to live a virtuous life, a good life, a life of grace. And how do we do this? We do it by recognizing that individuals are ends in themselves. We don't look at individuals as objects. They are always subjects. And society should appeal to the best in individuals, to our best instincts, not our basest instincts, and then help to inspire us to an inner conversion, to taking on. By living a virtuous life, virtue is something that you try to spread out. And if you want it, a good virus that goes out and infects others in a good way, making them virtuous by your own virtue. And so here, it's the reaching out from me to the society and world through human rights, social justice, and works of justice, works of service to other people. With the help of God's grace, we can recognize that love is the true basis of reform. The foundation on which we build social justice begins with love of one another, because God loved us first. And so it helps us to respect the rights of others and gives us the power we need to treat them justly and respond to them selflessly. And it goes on in the Catechism of the Catholic Church to say this: there is no solution to social questions apart from the gospel. If we want to find out what are the solutions to those problems, terrorism, poverty, unemployment, hunger, homelessness, pollution, etc., we simply study the Gospels, the Beatitudes, in the Old Testament, the Ten Commandments, the Pauline letters where he exhorts people to live in a virtuous life. Through all of that, through the parables, we learn these virtues that will help us transform all of those problems into a common good. Now, there comes a very important question. How do I relate to the state? How do I respect human authority? And this is very complex. Every legal system has ways of explaining this. But what I'm going to use is again from the textbook, which says this: authority is the quality invested in persons or institutions. Persons meaning a leader, an elected leader, or constitution or institutions, a legislature, a branch of government, to make laws and give orders. This is the whole point. Authority is given to an elected or appointed official and to a body to enact and give laws, to make laws and give orders. And so when they say green light means go, red light means stop, the collective agreed, yes, we agree with this. And then we have traffic signs, etc. All authority for us, as Catholics, as Christians, all authority comes ultimately from God. Therefore, we should obey and respect those who hold positions of legitimate authority because we recognize that God is behind that. Those who hold positions of legitimate authority. The purpose of legitimate offices is to maintain order in society and to promote the common good through just laws. The whole purpose of this is to seek a common good that can help us develop laws that can protect us from terrorism, protect us from poverty, protect us from unemployment, protect us from hunger, homelessness, etc. That's the authority. Now, the citizen in the same society has a right to choose their political leaders by Catholic social justice. Catholic social justice has upheld for centuries that the individual has the right to choose their political leaders. And the Church, though, accepts a variety of political regimes that serve the common good as morally acceptable. They are not saying that this form of government is better than that. It's not a qualitative one. They are saying that citizens have a right to choose the form of government. Many people can live under a despotic form of government because they choose to go along with it for whatever reason. And so the Church is not opposed to that, as long as the rights of the citizen are being answered or addressed. Everyone is limited by the rule of law. This is a phrase, unfortunately, that is used very glibly in these last years. Rule of law. The rule of law is the legitimate authority that promotes freedom and responsibility and serves the common good through just, moral, and equitable laws. The rule of law is there to serve, not to subvert. It is there to enhance our life, not to make it more difficult. And then we come from the rule of law, you go into now the word over there, the common good. What is the common good? In the Second Vatican Council in the 1960s, one of the most important documents was the Constitution of the Church in the Modern World, which was a huge breakthrough in the 1960s of seeing the Church in dialogue with the world. And there it defined the common good as this. The common good is the sum of those conditions of social life which allows social groups and their individual members relatively through thorough and ready access to their own fulfillment. That's a really complicated definition. Let me break it down. This whole idea of the common good can be broken down into 3 points. 1, the common good is there to have respect for the fundamental, inalienable human rights of persons. Now, we're going to get into lots of fights on what are the inalienable rights of a human being. But that's the first thing. The common good is to respect the inalienable rights of the human person. Number 2, the common good is that's social development and spiritual and material well-being of society. That's what the common good is for the social development and spiritual and material well-being of society. The common good is to give people food to eat, clothing to wear, access to health care, a job, giving people a job, and finally, protecting their culture. These are the parts that the social development and spiritual material well-being are these points. The third part of common good, so first you have respect for the fundamental inalienable rights. Second, those things that enhance the social development and spiritual material well-being of the members. And third, the creation of conditions that enable society to exist in peace with security and justice. And so this is very important, for them to exist in peace with security and justice. Within any nation, government officials must defend and promote the common good of civil society, the people, and intermediate bodies. That's the work of government. It is there to defend and promote the common good, not to tamp it down. Internationally, you have this interdependence among nations and peoples, which grows. Decades ago, before plane travel, the interdependence of nations was very limited. But since the Second World War, going into the 50s, 60s, 70s, and with the building up of this plane travel, people now are not that far away from other countries. I remember as a young man, post-university, traveling through Europe, and in those days we used to have a book you would buy, Europe on $5 a day, if ever. And it literally taught young people coming out of universities how to travel with a backpack and spend less than $5 a day, and that included room and board and food and everything, travel. And you could do it. Again, this is going back some 50, 60 years. Today you couldn't do it on $5 an hour. But what it did is it helped challenge the human spirit to use creativity, ingenuity, and the means that were available. Now, in those days, Europe was not the European Union of today. It was a series of individual countries, each with its own language, its own currency, its own culture. And the excitement of traveling through Europe was that every time you boarded a train and in a few hours crossed a border and your passport was checked, you switched language. You went from Belgium to German, German to French, German to Austrian, Austrian German, or German to Italian, Italian to Greece or Spain or Lisbon. You were floating around, and each time you crossed a border, the language changed. The culture changed. The border police changed. Some places, Germany, I always remember, they boarded trains with these giant dogs, German shepherds, who were sniffing around. It was the 1960s, 70s. They were looking for drugs. We were simply looking to get to the next town. You would have the difference in currency. By the time you traveled 2 or 3 weeks in Europe, your wallet would be full of all these different currencies, and it was a challenge of mathematics, keeping each currency in your mind. What is it worth in my own money? Now we only have the euro. So in one sense, things are easier now. Okay, internationally, this interdependence of nations is something that we are forced into, whether we like it or not. We become interdependent. And thus, for social justice, this means that nations should organize to promote the universal common good, not to be an obstacle to common good. They should promote it, always keeping in mind human progress and development, and the good of persons who must never be subordinated to the state. Such international cooperation must always proceed from truth, justice, and love. And so the common good is promoted internationally on every level when people participate according to their positions or roles in society. This means, on a practical level, for employers, that they give a just wage to the people that they employ, that parents provide food and shelter as well as emotional support to their children. That's two different areas. For employees to employers to employees, parents to children. And then Christians, people of faith, we are called to get involved in politics and in public life, what is called the public square. Every old town has a public square where people would gather in the evenings after a meal or taking a walk or just getting out, and you would meet everyone in a public square. And the idea in philosophical discourse is a place where you can publicly meet others, converse with others, not shout at others, and share ideas. Not be trying to beat them down or dehumanize them or working against human values. Unfortunately, the public discourse, and I say this in all honesty, in my own country, has reached a base level where people can no longer be of two different viewpoints and even share a meal. One of the excitements of growing up when I grew up, my parents never, ever uttered an ethnic slur about anyone. And they wouldn't allow us to learn those kind of words. We were brought up that everyone, no matter what their background, they were equal and they were people to be respected. My parents came from two different cultural backgrounds, though they were both American. My father's family was not an immigrant family. They had been in the States for generations. They were settled. My mother's family were newly immigrant from Italy. And they each came with their own values. But the beauty was my parents met at a time in history where my generation was raised totally without these, I won't say totally, but in a great measure without all of these ethnic divisions. Because what happened in World War II, our entire nation was fighting against entire other nations, and it brought everyone together for a common purpose. Not that war is great, but it did, in a way, equalize society in the United States at that time. So, what is social justice? Why am I giving this course? It'll probably get me in trouble. But in teaching about the Catholic Church and about faith, social justice is found in every textbook on preparing people for baptism. It is a very important point because the charitable arm of the Church, which operates in the field of social justice, is very important. The Church has always been interested in the achievement of social justice. That is, the fostering of a just society which guarantees that individuals and associations obtain what is due to them according to their nature and their vocation. The perfect example would be St. Thomas More's Utopia, utopianism. This great society that Thomas More wrote about, the utopian society. Now, we're not going to achieve it, but we work towards it all the time. We never give up that struggle. By the end of the 19th century, the Church had already developed a rich tradition of social justice teachings, which respects the rights and the dignity of the human person. The first document, called Rerum Novarum, of New Things, by the late Pope Leo XIII, talked about the role of labor. You were dealing with, coming into the industrial age, people coming into working in slave factories, people working for hardly legal wages, and then the movements in Europe of socialism and communism were rising up. And the church had to respond to these challenges on both sides by saying, we have to defend the rights of the workers to organize for justice. Now, that's going to be a long thing, and I will get into it in a minute, how we do that. This comes into the formation of unions, trade unions. They are not sinful by nature. Sometimes they can become problematic, such as in my own country, but in principle, the idea of workers gathering to protect their rights and to uplift the whole group of them through a common wage or a minimum wage, etc., this is not seen as a negative. Interestingly, in the church promotes unionization. But I worked in the Vatican government, as many of you know, for 13 years, under two popes, Pope John Paul II, St. John Paul, and Pope Benedict. And we have our own ranks, we are basically civil servants in the Vatican under the governmental organization. I had risen up to a very high rank in that social group. Now, one of the things we were told, we had no right to unionize. And we used to laugh, saying the whole rights of unionization come out of the 19th century teachings of the Catholic Church on social justice. They're good for everybody but those of us in the Vatican. We never figured that one out. We one time jokingly were going to go outside our building at 12 noon and bang things together and make noise like the other Italian trade unions. I forget what right we were trying to fight for. And the cardinal in charge of the office just laughed and said, "You go out there, you're fired." Now, in unions, you can't do that. We didn't have a union. We were basically working for the good of the church, and we didn't go outside. The church is interested in the achievement of social justice. The church's social teaching interprets historical events under the guidance of the Holy Spirit, with a view always of applying the Gospels of Jesus Christ here to our world and the common good. It's in the Gospels we get the answer, what is the common good? Most of the parables of Jesus can be used in interpreting in one way or another some common good that people were facing at his time and that we face even today. And so they include principles for reflection, that we look at the scripture to reflect on what did Jesus say. Quite often, unfortunately, in the liturgy of the word at Mass, we hear a first reading, a psalm, a second reading, a gospel, a homily, and then we go right into the creed. Ideally, there should be a few moments of silent reflection for us to put this all together, to let it sink in, because it's a lot. The first reading, the psalm, the second reading, the gospel, and then the priest's reflection, the homily, trying to put some ideas, giving us a key to understand the readings of the day. Now, ideally, the priest should sit for a few minutes, but because we are in a society that runs on time, and we have to get Mass finished in a certain amount of time, or we have to get Mass these days uploaded in a certain amount of time, we seem not to have the leisure we need to sit quietly and reflect. And I would say for many people, one of the things that we do when we upload the Mass in our parish webpage, you have all the readings of the day there. And I would encourage people to read them before the Mass begins. Go over the readings. Don't go into my homily. I make the mistake of printing the homily. I should stop doing that. But read the readings 2 or 3 times before you hear them in the Mass. Or make them part of your prayer at night on a Sunday to review the readings of the Sunday. And they will and have them carry you through for the week. So that's the first thing. To come to our social doctrine, we take the Gospels and we apply them to these problems, seeking the common good. The Gospels provide us also with a criteria for judgment, and they give us guidelines for action. So the Gospels are there to give us principles to reflect on, to provide a criterion to make a judgment, good and evil, and a way to move to action. So these Gospels, the Gospel readings, and the social teaching of the Church addresses how individuals or groups should apply the Gospel to the structures around them. This was a great challenge when I was a seminarian, because we were coming out of the Second Vatican Council, which was really pushing these theories of social justice quite a bit. And we would spend hours and hours and hours reflecting on gospel passages and then applying them to the world around us. One of the greatest examples, and unfortunately it's very hard to find, is a movie called The Clown. It was a movie made in Europe, very poor quality in color. It came out around 1965 or 66. It was while I was still in high school, but I saw it for the first time when I was in university. I may try to find it. I did look it up recently. Unfortunately, the film was so poorly made at the time, and it was so seen by many people, the copy available on YouTube is extremely poor. But it has Jesus pictured as a clown in a traveling circus. And if you know anything about a circus, you have many different, very strange individuals in the circus. The fat man, the lady with the beard, the acrobats, the animal trainers, this, that, everything. And you have this clown who joins the circus train. And they're going from town to town, and this clown ends up trying to save different people who are being oppressed in the circus. A woman who is sexually assaulted, a man who is being overworked, an animal trainer who is beating mercilessly his animals, etc. And in each case, the clown, taking the role, it's supposed to be a prefiguring of Christ, tries to, without speaking, in pantomime, to enter into whatever conflict is there and move to a common good. And in the end, the clown is crucified. So you see where the film is going. But this is what the whole purpose of this analysis of human situations is. See, look, act. This is one of the great principles. Oh, yeah. I think I have it backwards. Wait a minute, let me think a minute. Yeah, see, look, act. This was a principle coming out of the 1960s, helping young people to discern right from wrong. You see something happening. You look at it more closely, examine it, discern it, discuss it, and then you move to an action to resolve it. And so the see, look, act was used by young Catholic students, young Catholic workers, to assess problems they were facing. I used it when I lived in a socialist country, Tanzania, and we were dealing with many of these issues over there, especially unemployment, hunger, homelessness, poverty, lack of education, lack of health services. And we would meet once a week and pick an incident, and then we would pick it out, look at it more closely, and then resolve to do something for the common good. Sorry. I got it now. I knew I would. See, judge, act. It's 70 years plus. The brain moves a little slowly. See, judge, act. Look at the situation, judge it, and then move to resolve it. This is how we look at social justice. Do unto others as you would want others to do unto you. That's the bottom line. Do to others as you would want others to do to you. Show respect for them. Show compassion for them. Show interest in them. So as a seminarian, we would be given many opportunities to work for the common good. One was in college and university, every Saturday, we would volunteer to go to one of the most hellish hospitals, a public hospital in Chicago, Cook County Hospital. It was a nightmare of filth, and only the poorest people went into Cook County Hospital, most of them being Black Americans. We were all Caucasian seminarians. We would go early in the morning on a Saturday, and we would volunteer in the hospital for 8 hours. What it meant was we would be taken to a ward, and there would be male patients there, sometimes 30, 40. We would do the things I would do, help bathe them, help change their clothing, clean their dressings with the nurses under a nurse's direction, shave them, give haircuts to them, go out and run errands for those who needed things, like they wanted a special kind of sandwich or a hamburger or a hot dog. Often we used our own meager sources of money for this. We would read the Bible to them. We would bring books for them to read, magazines. We were there for 8 hours simply to be nice to them, to be kind. We got nothing for it. At most, we were given a smock as a uniform so that the patients knew who we were. But it made us feel at least that we were trying somehow to visit the sick. Remember last class, the corporal works of mercy. Feed the hungry, clothe the naked, visit the sick. We were doing all of those. We weren't giving drink to the thirsty. The hospital would have shot us. But we were there to care for them and to show the dignity that each person deserves. So the central themes on page 263 of your textbook, the central themes of Catholic social justice are listed there. The profound dignity of the individual person. Each person is created by God in God's image, and that gives them a personal and individual dignity. And then it is to move towards the essential equality among humans. There is no group greater than or lesser than another group, to treat all as equal. I again thank God for the experience of living in Tanzania, especially in my younger years. I was only one of 3 Caucasians living in a town of 26,000. I got to see, under very nice circumstances, what it meant to be in the minority and to stand out. My white skin stood out, actually, my red skin, because I was constantly sunburned living on the equator. But I began to see how you see people in a different light when you become the minority, the one who stands out. You have to also look for the link between justice and love. We seek justice because of God's love and the love of Christ. And then you have to be able to confront political and economic rights. That's a very slippery slope for everyone dealing with issues of social justice. Then you're going to get into the topic of stewardship, taking care of what you are given. And we have stewardship on two levels. Stewardship of our wealth, and now, more and more in the 21st century, stewardship of the ecology, of the earth, where we live, taking care of what God has given us with this planet. I have a friend of mine who has just finished university, and he works in an area that is inundated with polluted rivers, though it's like a paradise on earth. And he spends every day cleaning up rivers that somehow continue to get polluted because of the erosion of the earth around the sides of these rivers. It's almost a job that will never end. But he keeps going because he is committed to making the earth clean and livable for future generations. We work towards economic justice, that people are not enslaved or given a form of employment that is unjust. It's very difficult when you're dealing with people who have many classes on the economic scale, such as here in Hong Kong. We go from the super wealthy to the super poor, all in a matter of a few blocks in some parts of this city. And here, how do you work towards solving unemployment, especially in a year where most people have not been able to go fully into employment, especially people in menial jobs such as washing dishes, cleaning, doing food services, working in the hotel industry, cleaning rooms, etc. They've lost their jobs. And because of that, they aren't able to afford anymore. Most of these people live in the Northern Territories or the outskirts of Hong Kong. Thanks to the MTR system, they would be able to commute to their job, but go home and live in a more reasonable housing estate that didn't cost them their whole month's salary. But then when they're not getting the salary, they can't pay the rent. They can't pay the rent, they are evicted. Or people who have a small business and the business has been shut down now for months and months. They can't pay the rent. The rent lords don't ever lower the rent. That would be a miracle of social justice if those who own the properties would suspend the rental. But they can't. So here, working for economic justice, that's what it means. Another part of it is working towards human solidarity among people, trying to get people of different racial and cultural groups together to see that they're not that different, that they are the same. I've watched a program recently, I won't say the name of it, but it involves some Americans, and they went to an Asian country. And they are rather dense when it comes to Asian sensitivities and customs. Americans are very much we were until COVID, into hugging, shaking hands, hugging, grabbing, blah, 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 blah. Okay. Now, thanks to COVID, we're into an elbow and keeping distance. But these Americans show up in an Asian country where people do not hug each other. They do not hold hands with each other. They do not do any of those things. And they go in to greet somebody, and there is this person they're greeting, and they just go up and they go and wrap their arms, and the man just froze. Just, oh, what are you doing? You're touching me. Urgh. And they're hugging him. Oh, we love to hug. And of course, he's trying to say in his own language, we hate hugging. Don't hug us. Keep away. not respecting boundaries. What is the social distance we respect? But here it's in promoting human solidarity among people, building a bridge to understand. Another part of this that we learned again years ago was to work for a preferential option for the poor. If I am able to work with any group, choose to work with the poor, if I have the choice, or to at least show a preference for their point of view so that they have someone championing them. And finally, to promote a sense of peace among nations, to really work towards peace between nations, among nations. Now, in your textbook, for those of you following in the textbooks, each of these central themes is outlined from pages 263 through the end, really. Yes, through 270, to the end, to 273. It's not that I'm not going to talk about them. I am going to cherry pick some of these points right now. I will say, for those who are interested in a particular topic, if I don't cover it today, then write me a note, because I'm watching my time element. Write me a note, and I will try to go back and review it in a subsequent class. So, I'm using another set of notes, which I unfortunately cannot give out. And these are basically notes on the Catholic social justice, an overview. And it's going to pretty much bring out what I've already said. I'm going to use some, like I've done in the other classes, I'm going to use some incidents, some stories, and then we'll see how on this discussion of social justice, where we fall. So the first one is this. People with physical disabilities should be given special treatment in schools, in shopping malls, in parking lots, etc. Do you agree, disagree, don't know what to think? People with physical disabilities should be given special treatment in schools, in shopping malls, in parking areas, etc. This means putting in ramps, like we have here at our church. This would mean that churches should make sure that they are accessible for someone in a wheelchair, someone who is not able to climb steps, etc. Or in my country, you get a tag on your car which says handicapped. And I have true confessions. My mother, because she had a stroke, she was eligible for one of those cards, and one of my brothers took it and he hung it on his car in another state. My mother never was in his car. I see people all the time with those tags. It drives me crazy. They come in and they get special parking closer to the store entrance. And you see people get out of the car, no one with a walker, wheelchair, cane, nothing. Maybe somebody at home is in a wheelchair, but they're not. But they get the prime parking seat. And we all know, I used to watch this at airlines, people getting pushed onto a plane in a wheelchair. So they get on the plane before everyone else. Okay? Then I see them walking around in the plane when we take off. And I thought, how did they, was the going up in the air and the height of the plane and the oxygen levels, did this cure them of their illness? And then, of course, we land, and they're the same people waiting for people with wheelchairs to wheel them through the airport again. Okay. Where now? You're not looking for exceptions. You're looking for a value statement. Do you think people with physical disabilities should be given these allowances? Most people would say yes. Should economically poor students who have received a substandard education be given special consideration when they apply for university? Should students who have, because of economic reasons, received a substandard education in primary and secondary school be given a preferential position in applying for university? Do you agree or disagree? Do you agree with the idea that in society there are winners and losers, and that winning is the only thing that counts? That is becoming an issue, where we now have, when I grew up, you had winner, first, second, and third place. Everyone else was a loser. Now you get a trophy just for showing up. Is that helping form strong character? And is the winner takes all the best option? I'm just raising the question. We have society in many parts of the world is so tipped in favor of men that women must work much harder than men to get ahead in the professional world. Is that true? Is it true here in Hong Kong? I know it's true in many different parts of the world, and in greater or lesser degree. Do you think that it should be changed? Another one, people can get good, meaningful jobs if they put their minds to it. Now, the question of unemployment is a very difficult one. There are jobs, but a lot of times it's not what you know, it's who you know where you get a job. I mean, that's all over the world. It's not what you know, it's who you know. Who do you know can hire someone or get someone and all? And I admit, even myself, I have tried to use it in a limited way. Never to get anyone a job, but to at least get information about jobs. To help people who are in a rut, who want to go somewhere and they just don't have the ability to get there. Is there a way of overcoming that? And can that be a social justice good, helping the unemployed? There is this other statement, there is no reason ever to justify denying a person his or her God-given inalienable rights. Can anyone disagree with that? And why? Is there any reason you can deny someone their inalienable rights? Now, almost everyone right now is going, of course you can't. No, never. What about murderers? People condemned to prison for murdering someone, taking a life. They lose some of their inalienable rights by being put in prison. Or are you saying close the prisons and let everyone go? See, what seemed like a very easy, simple, straightforward question, you get down to a practical part of it, and then you're going to have to make a value judgment. See, judge, act. Some of these statements that I just read through, they are found in our human life. And the principles of social teaching in the church revolve around a wheel, if you will, that begins with the human dignity. At the center of it, you have, just think of this whole thing as this big, giant wheel. And here at the heart of it is me. And I am with my identity. I am created by God with human dignity. And so that human dignity is going to go to, one, respect all life. Respect life. Respect life. I respect myself. Therefore, I respect all life. And then that life goes next to the family. It moves from me to the idea of life for everyone, and then to my family, community, family and community. And then it's going to go on to my rights and duties in the family and the community. Rights, duties. I want to remind everyone that there are two parts to law. You have rights, and then you have duties that you perform that help sustain the rights. In the Catholic, in the law that I am a lawyer for, the canon law has a whole section I will teach later on the rights of everyone who is a Catholic. But in the same part are the duties of everyone who is a Catholic. You can't just claim the rights. You have to take the rights and the duties together. You can't be one or the other. They are both and. And then these are moving you towards the common good. I respect life, and then in my family, and from my family to the community, to the rights and duties I give my family, my community, my nation, for the common good. And then the common good will be broken down into the option for the poor, the preferential option for the poor. For employment and employees, for work and workers. Human solidarity between and among cultures and nations and peoples. And finally, stewardship of wealth, stewardship of the earth. This is the spectrum of human rights and social justice. This little circle, beginning with me and then moving out. The wheel includes the principle of the common good. And this common good is what leads into the common good for the poor, the common good for work and workers, the common good for solidarity among nations and peace, and finally, the common good for the stewardship of God's creation, the world and the things in the world. And so you have these different principles, beginning with the dignity of the human person. This is going to be a whole separate section that's going to follow this lecture today on respect of life and human sexuality. The principle of the dignity of the human person and the respect for human life at every stage is fundamental for Christian Catholic moral beliefs. It is not an option, it is a principle fundamental to everything else we value. The fundamental principle holds that every person, regardless of gender, race, age, nationality, religion, or economic status, every person deserves respect. I should never look down on anyone. Our dignity does not come from what we have or what we do. Our dignity comes from being created by God in His image. It's not what I have or what I do. My dignity comes from that moment of conception and creation. Every human being is created in the image of God and redeemed by Jesus Christ, and therefore every individual is invaluable and worthy of respect as a member of the human family. And then moving on to this respect for life is, for us who are Catholics, it is every stage of human life, what we call womb to tomb. From conception to natural death. Every stage of a human's life is precious and worthy of our respect and protection. Unless human life is treated as sacred and respected as such, every person then, this is done, our human dignity is belittled and it becomes lesser. And so here, this principle of human life from conception to natural death. Everything we judge in human sexuality comes from this concept and is very important, and it will be a separate class. The next lecture will be on this idea of human sexuality and all the other problems we're facing on these views. Now, how do Christians view the human person? We are created in God's image and likeness. If one thing, those of you who have been my catechumens in the past, or even the current group, I have emphasized over and over and over again, Genesis chapter 1, God created them, man and woman, in his image. Man and woman, he created them. God created man in his image, in the divine image he created him. Male and female he created them. God blessed them, saying, be fertile and multiply, fill the earth and subdue it. So this is how we begin our theology of the human person and how we come to see about what it means to be human. God created us. Our humanity is God's gift. Each human being is a child of God. So if God is our Father, then we are brothers and sisters to one another. This is how we build up the idea of the body of the church. We are all unique. Every individual created is unique. Well, individual, singular. We are special in God's eyes. I remember a woman who I went to university graduate school with. She was an albino. This is a person born lacking a certain genetic characteristic for their skin color. They come out pure white, and their eyes are pink, and they really do look very different. And this girl had the voice of an angel. The first time I noticed her was singing in church during Vespers. We were praying, and all of a sudden there was a voice coming out singing a solo part of the Magnificat, and everyone stopped whatever they were doing. We all looked. Where is this voice coming from? It was like the voice of an angel, a truly beautiful voice. And there is this girl with white hair, white face, pink eyes, slightly overweight, very kind of disheveled in appearance, and this voice of God coming from her. And she used to walk around, and this was 1976 when I met her. In 1976, she wore often around campus a T-shirt which simply says, I am beautiful because God does not create junk. And it was a funny T-shirt, but it disarmed people because here was a woman making a statement. And it got to the point we were so used to her, and she had wonderful grace in the way she interacted with us. By the end of a week or two, no one noticed she looked different. She just fit in with all of us. Because we saw and we learned from her how to appreciate her uniqueness. Because we are created in God's image, we have rights and responsibilities, rights and duties. And this is something very important. We have a right. A right is a claim we can make on each other and on society for certain basic minimum conditions. I have a right to name something. I have a right to, what do I have a right to? Freedom. I have a right to good health. I have a right to happiness. I don't have a right to live in a 5-story mansion. I have a right to shelter. I don't have a right to eat until I'm stuffed, but I do have a right to basic food and necessities. And then from these basic rights, then we move to duties. What are the duties I have to give in order to enhance or protect my rights? On a spiritual nature, we have an immortal soul that God gives us. That is something given to us, and we have a right and duty to protect it. We possess freedom. We are born freely. The circumstances around us can in many ways temper the freedom we have. But we are born free, and we must use whatever freedoms we have responsibly. We are social beings. We live with other people. We are not meant to live alone. Only very rare vocations to the monastic life, to the Cenobitic life, people who live alone in caves, they're different. We are not sociopaths. We are social beings. We live for each other. One of the great signs right now of being sociopaths here in Hong Kong, when we go out to eat and we're put behind plexiglass walls, and many of us find it very uncomfortable, if not unnatural, because we're meant to. One of the great things about meals are a social function. The most delightful and the most memorable meals are shared meals, not a meal I cook and eat by myself in front of TV or watching a movie or playing with my computer. The meals that we most treasure are social events. Now, we are missing them. Some of you know I went out for the first time in months a few days ago when the government allowed us to be 4 at a table without plexiglass dividers. And it was enjoyable, very enjoyable, to be able to sit at a table with friends and talk. Otherwise, we're divided. I've had dinners where we were 3 people. One was at one table and 2 of us are at the other. Very crazy. So we are social beings. And we are in the image of God when we best show love for one another. This is how we show we are living and in the image and likeness of God, and how we love each other. Going back to here, if I love God, then I love others. It's horizontal and vertical. Horizon, vertical. And one thing we remember, God has made us co-creators with Him. He has given us stewardship over the earth, to till it, to make it work, to protect it. But we are not God. Genesis makes it very clear, we are not the creator. We are God's instruments, and He uses us and entrusts us with creation. We name the animals, we name the plants, we name the things. We till the earth. It is given to us in stewardship, not to waste, but to use for the benefit of others. Now, I want to just move a little bit ahead. What are the rights we have as human beings? This is also, we talk about inalienable or inviolable rights, universal rights. We have a right to life. We have a right to life. This is very, very important. I have a right to live. No one has a right to take my life. This is why the church is so against the concept of abortion, because this child is a human from the moment of conception, and someone else is taking away their life. They are removing what is an inalienable right. Every person has the right to life, to bodily integrity, and to the means which are suitable for the development of life: education, health, food, clothing, social services. Those are human rights. Therefore, a human being also has the right to security. I have a right to be socially, I am getting a pension, to Social Security. You have the right to be taken care of in time of sickness. or when you lose unemployment because of an injury, or when you become a widow or widower because of death, or in old age, or when you lose a job which is not your fault. These are, again, inalienable rights that have to be protected. We have moral and cultural rights. Every human being has the right to respect for his person. And so this is a moral right. I have a right to be respected. And I have a right to my good name and my reputation. I have a right to freedom in searching for the truth. And I have a right to expressing and communicating my opinion. I cannot be told, don't say this, don't do that. Society does that. Governments do that. But this is an inalienable human right. I am born with a voice, with a mind, with these faculties to speak and to hear, to communicate. I have a right to pursue my interests within limits laid down by a moral order. Okay, now I'm going to say this. I have a right to pursue things that give me pleasure within limits. Within limits. That don't override other moral principles of society. I have the right to be informed about public events. I have a right to read the news, watch the news, hear the news. Sometimes society or a government will say, no, you don't have that right. But that is something inherently a human right. And finally, I have a right to worship God as I want. This is listed as among the rights of a human being, to honor God in whatever way I feel most comfortable, according to my own heart and soul, my own dictates. And then another right we often overlook. I have a right to choose freely my state in life. Human beings have the right to choose freely the state of life which they prefer. I prefer to be single. I prefer to be married. I prefer to be celibate or chaste. And so choosing your vocation, I talked about this a few classes ago when we talked about the sacrament of holy orders and matrimony. There are 3 states in life: the single life, the married life, and the chaste celibate life. You have a right to choose. You should not be pressured to follow one or the other. It's something you make out of a free choice. I have a right, we have certain economic rights. Now, when we come to economic rights, it's probably one of the areas where you will have arguments pro and con among people, or at least discussion. Parents have a right to support. I want to go back a bit to human rights of family. Because of DNA, we are, our DNA is given to us in conception, and it's formed by my mother and father coming together and creating me. My DNA becomes the unique product of the two of them, and it is very much my own. Now, from that, it follows that I have an attachment to that family. My parents, well, they could say, no, we don't want him, send him back. Or let me see what another model would look like, or whatever. No. Our genetic makeup makes us part of the family we are in. Or through adoption, the genetic side is put over to the side, and there is something else that comes in of compassion to adopt a child. Parents have a prior right to support and educate their children. Parents have a right to support and educate their children, and children have a right to be supported and educated. Again, within limits. Then you come to economic rights. This, again, as I mentioned, this will be difficult. When you turn to the economic sphere, it is clear that man has a right by the natural law to have the opportunity to work, but also to go about his work without coercion, meaning slavery. So there's two parts to it. Man has in the natural right, a natural law, he has an opportunity. Men and women like to work in order to get a sense of purpose, achievement, to do something, to create something, to say, I did this. It gives them a sense of their own worth. But they are not supposed to be forced into work as slaves, simply to be used as objects. They have a right to private property, even of productive goods. They have a right to get a salary and to buy whatever they need for their own life. Now, the right to private property is, again, conditioned by social structures around us. They have a right to meet with people they want. We talk about the right of association. People have a natural right, and in the church this is protected, to meet other people whom they want to associate with. I have lived in countries where the right of association is forbidden, absolutely forbidden. I have been in places where I was in a meeting with people in my church community and the police came in and stopped the meeting because they did not, in that country, give us the right of free association. So again, a lot of these rights will be tempered by political reality. Now, I'm going to end there because I will move on to other topics, especially on human rights. I would ask everyone to finish reading this chapter in your textbook from pages 263 to the very end on 274. And then I would invite you to read on your free time. It's not long. Read the letter of St. James. It is one of the most eloquent pieces of the New Testament on the concept of social justice. It would be a great thing. It's only a few pages long. You can read it in less than a half hour. But I would recommend this. The letter to St. James is towards the end of the New Testament. It is after all the Pauline epistles and after the letter to the Hebrews. Then you get the letter to James. So it becomes the letter to James, the letter to Peter, and the letters to John and Jude. Thank you very much. Have a productive week. And I will see you again in a week with our next lesson, which will be on this teaching, the Catholic teaching on sexual morality and right to life. Thank you.